Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Monday, May 19th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Texas game in 103 days, the game against Michigan in 194 days. If you're planning your next event, make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at gratefulgriddleoh.com. The long Southern swing trip is now over. Marc Givler and Kevin Noon wrapped that up right at the end of last week. 3 solid weeks on the road, talking to some of the top high school football players in the country, getting a little bit of insight, more than a little bit of analysis, all that and much more. This is why they spend all that time on the road. Kevin Noon, back home in lovely Ohio, joins me. Kevin, first of all, give us a rundown. How many miles, if it's not the exact number, that's okay. How many days, how many miles, how many high schools? I mean, give people a sense for exactly how much you guys did on the road.
I know the miles more than I know anything else. And it was just a little bit more than 5,300. And it was a little bit of a different journey because we skipped Houston. There were players in Houston, but there was more in Dallas. And we had a firm cap on this trip. We knew we wanted to be done by end of day Friday. And we had to make some tough decisions. And, there were a lot of players that I'm like, I think we really should go see this. And it just never, necessarily worked out. Players, I don't know. It was a lot. I mean, we went to a lot of high schools. I think we saw players in Virginia, North Carolina, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. And then there were 6 other states that we drove through, including South Carolina, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, as part of our round trip. So it was a lot. Was it our longest in terms of mileage trip that we've done? No, but I felt that we maximized the time we were out there is just shy of 3 weeks.
Yeah, that is a long time on the road. And May is typically a time when it's a little bit of a slow period for college football. Time when, if college football coaches are not on the road recruiting, this is often a time when they're maybe taking a little bit of a vacation. So this is one of those things that really turns a quiet time in the college football calendar into a very, very busy and productive time for all of us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. So glad you guys spent all that time in the car. And there is still plenty more content still to come from that trip. There are shows that have not and interviews that have not been released yet. So you can find a bunch of that on our YouTube channel right now at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. There is still more to come in the coming days. So make sure you keep checking back. And of course, check back at BuckeyeHuddle.com as well, where I'm sure they'll have a lot to talk about there. But what we're going to do on today's show is just kind of give you a little bit of this is a graduation time of year. So we're going to give you kind of like some senior superlatives. The guy who was the most of this, or the most surprising, or the biggest change, or whatever. We're just going to run through some of those sort of superlatives from this trip, because we're not going to be able to touch on everyone. So just want to give you some sort of highlights here. Let's start with maybe the most impressive offensive player that you met with, or maybe heard about from, because you guys are not just talking to players, you're talking to coaches, you're talking to folks at the school. So you're getting some real insight and analysis on all these kind of guys. Who is maybe the offensive player from this trip who jumps out the most to you?
Yeah, you're making me really do a Sophie's choice here, because, we're not talking to 2-star players because Ohio State's not recruiting 2-star players. So, we're talking about 4- and 5-star players. Maybe there's a bit of a recency bias, but I'm going to say Texas offensive lineman Felix Ojo. He is a major target for Ohio State. He just, he's somebody that just carries his weight so well. As somebody who doesn't carry their weight well, I can appreciate somebody who carries their weight well. But, there were so many talented offensive players. But I think that, for whatever reason, that Felix Ojo, in terms of just being first one off the bus, and, he's not going to play at this weight, a strength and conditioning program, going to do a lot of work with him. But, I think that he probably, when Tom presented me the questions beforehand, it's like, this is what we're talking about. Don't look stupid. That was the first name that came to mind.
I was very careful not to say don't look stupid. It was implied, but it didn't say it out loud. That's what makes me a professional. All right, let's move to the other side of the ball. Talk about defense. Is there a guy on the defensive side of the ball who maybe jumped out to you the most?
for the amount of time that we've been talking to Tyler Atkinson and we've been talking to Deuce Geralds, I think people would think that would be the first place that I would go. And I think those were the first names that came to my mind. But PJ Dean is going to be kind of my guy there. I think that PJ Dean, really impressive. I think that he's somebody that's not being talked about enough. Whether or not he ends up at Ohio State, I guess we'll find out here pretty soon as he goes through his visits. But again, there were so many talented guys. I could just go through, I could go through the list of players that we saw. And again, it truly is a Sophie's choice type of situation of, don't make me pick a favorite, but I know that's what the people want. So that's what we're going to do. But that doesn't mean just because somebody didn't make my little short list doesn't mean that they weren't impressive. I think that the quality of player that we talked to from day 1 to day 19 or 20 or whatever it ended up being, was just ridiculously high. And, Ohio State really does a good job of just vetting these kids that it really goes all in on.
And I don't know if you actually said PJ Dean is a 4-star defensive end from North Carolina. You went into a lot of the specifics about him, but I don't know if we actually said that out loud. You may have. So if you did, I apologize. But yeah, so that is who PJ Dean is. How about the guy who is the currently uncommitted? Because I initially had this as the person you talk to who's the most likely to end up a Buckeye. I was like, well, you have guys who are currently committed to Ohio State who are probably at the top of that list, and that wouldn't exactly be news. So how about the guy who is currently uncommitted, who you think is maybe the most likely to end up in an Ohio State recruiting class in the coming years?
Deuce Geralds. I think that the defensive lineman from the state of Georgia is the most likely, and that there's still a long way of committed to signed. It doesn't mean that if you get that commitment that it's over, you can just sit there and everybody can high five and a little libation can be had, and then it's on to the next one. You're going to have to keep recruiting him. But I think of everybody that we talk to, and honestly, for me, it's got to be somebody who's class of 26, because if we get to 27 and everything else, we're getting so far down the line and so much stuff can change. So let's narrow the field a little bit by making it the rising seniors. And I think that I have Gerald at the top of my list.
All right. That's an interesting answer. How about the guy who changed your opinion, maybe your opinion of him or his game or where he might play on the field? Whatever it is, the guy who changed your opinion or your thought on him maybe the most on that trip?
You see, and that question is so broad that it could be taken so many ways. I'm going to say the player that comes to my mind is Braylon Womack, and I'm going to go even more so than I already knew he's an impressive player. I've already watched his tape. I already know he truly is a 5-star. I really think that now that I've had an opportunity to talk to him 12 minutes, 14 minutes on air, plus another 20 minutes off air, and talk to his mom and everything else, I think there's a really good connection with Ohio State there. I always was a little skeptical, maybe more skeptical than a lot of other experts in this market about Womack's chances of ending up at Ohio State, but I feel pretty strongly now. I really see everything. He mentioned Caleb Downs multiple times, and he truly is kind of the next Caleb Downs in a lot of ways. And Ohio State's certainly hoping that they get him out of high school instead of through the portal or whatever, so you can get 3 full years of him. Because let's be honest, that is certainly the goal of the players now.
Braylon Womack, a 5-star safety out of Mississippi. Again, but yeah, so that's why, if you're wondering, Caleb Downs, yeah, that's why, because he could be literally the next Caleb Downs if he does end up at Ohio State. And he was someone who people on our board watching the interview you guys did with him came away very, very impressed with him. Not, the film is one thing, but just as an individual and just the intelligence and the maturity and all that kind of stuff, he was someone who people on our board were really, really blown away by. And so that was actually going to lead me into your next question. And I will not allow you to choose Braylon Womack again for this one. So we can set him to the side. But maybe the most impressive player off the field in terms of a lot of the stuff I just said about Braylon Womack: maturity, intelligence, poise, looking for the right things in terms of a college, whatever it is. Who was maybe the most impressive off the field person for you on this trip?
I'm going to take a 27 on this case, because this one doesn't have to necessarily be limited into somebody who's supposed to commit in the next 7 to 9 months, and that's going to be running back Amir Brown. I really liked him. He was somebody that Marc had a chance to talk to at a camp recently, and Marc told me going into the interview, oh, wait, you're going to be really impressed with this kid. Didn't know a whole heck of a lot about him, but a lot of James Peoples in him. And it's not necessarily body type to body type. There is some of that. I mean, James Peoples is kind of physically a freak, and people have not seen that yet because there were 2 guys ahead of him in Quinshon Judkins and Trevion Henderson, but very much in their personalities. It was uncanny. I mean, even if I didn't have that bug planted in my head, gone, like any of that stuff, it was already, I mean, talking to him for 5 minutes, I'm like, this is James Peoples 2.0. So I was really impressed in talking to him. And again, I'd be remiss if I didn't say 20 other players, but that's not what Tom asked. So I'm going to just say the one, and it was Amir Brown.
All right, we'll do a show later in the week where I ask you who is the second most impressive on all of these questions, and
that's going to be on the Big Meat Kickoff. I'm just sorry, I got to save something for my own show.
All right, well then let's wrap up the football talk and let's get to what people are really here for. Kevin, you were on the road for basically 3 full weeks. That means 21 lunches, 21 dinners, probably a bunch of hotel breakfasts. But what was the best meal you ate on the road? You were in a part of the country that is known for, I mean, you have a lot of defensive linemen and a lot of offensive linemen down there, and that is because the food is quite good and not necessarily always the most heart healthy. What was the best meal you had on the road?
No hotel breakfast, 0 on the entire trip. I took every minute that I could to sleep, and there were a lot of times we were out of the hotel by like 7:15 to get to a school. Ultimately, we did a lot of fast food, so getting it narrowed down to just the actual sit-down meals is not as bad as you would think. There are 2 meals that come to mind, and I will mention the runner-up first, and that was a place in Jackson, Mississippi. It was kind of just a country type of place that's been in business for 90-plus years. I had chicken fried steak and rice and gravy, and it was amazing, and it still came up short to the meal I had in Baton Rouge. And this place is called LC's Plate and Pie or Pie and Plate, whatever it was fantastic. And went with my friend who runs an LSU site, and this place was recently featured not only on diners, drive-ins, and dives, but if you're somebody who hangs out online, there's these 2 British dudes, Jace and somebody, they were just there as well. And what did I have? I had fried chicken and red beans and rice and a slice of key lime pie. And I've had some nice steak dinners along the way, but it was amazing. And there's a third meal I want to jump in, and it was with one of our members on the site over at Buckeye Huddle with Florida Buckeye. We went to his house. He prepared brisket and a warm potato salad and these sweet heat baked beans that were fantastic. And I know he will text me and email me and call me if he finds out that I didn't mention him. So he absolutely won the home division of the meals, but Elsie's Plate and Pie was maybe the best meal I've had on Southern Swing.
All right, we are not in the business of doxing anyone, but I can now apparently confirm to you Florida Buckeye is not Lincoln Riley. So there you go. Good brisket for Kevin, good brisket for Marc. Great content for you all at BuckeyeHuddle.com, and of course on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/BuckeyeHuddle. You can do a real deep dive on a lot of these guys. They're generally not talking to people who are not interested in Ohio State. So these are all folks who are going to be names that you're going to be seeing and hearing and reading, and we're going to be talking about in the coming weeks and months and potentially years as the Buckeyes round out their 2026 and 2027 and 2028 classes and beyond. So you want to check all of that out on our YouTube channel. Tons and tons of content. And as I said, still more potentially to come from that trip because you end up with a ton of interviews and podcasts and all that kind of stuff. We've given you some of that on the Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning feed, but you can find all of that on our YouTube channel. And if you want to listen to it instead of watch it, you can find that on the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast feed. You should be subscribed to that right now if you're not. So go ahead and take a second, subscribe to that. That's the show that Marc and Kevin do, but they also have a bunch of their interviews, including the Felix Ojo interview in that podcast feed. Again, I think you guys will enjoy that show. Take a second, subscribe to that. Lots of great content there. And of course, lots of great content at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where we got our whole team Kevin, Tony, and I covering the team. We got Marc and we got Berm covering recruiting. We got Andrew Ellis on the board. We got our whole team of X's and O's gurus. That is all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. This would be a great time to sign up to become a member. Just $4.99 for your first month. There is going to be just an absolute wave of content coming the next couple months as camps happen in June. We got all sorts of official visits happening in June. Of course, the turn to the season in July with the Big Ten Media Days in Vegas. We'll be out there for that. And then camp opens in August, and then that Texas game just 103 days away. It is coming fast. You're going to want to be prepared. That means you're going to want to be at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.